And so if you go out and chop wood, bring the whole wood home and you use that to burn, you heat your home, you cook food, you power something simple, that gives you a certain return on energy. So you spent 1 unit of energy, right? Basically food energy, the work of the man that went out and chopped it all up and brought it back. But you're getting a multiple of energy back. Maybe you're getting 5 times as much energy from the burning of that wood than the food of that man that had to go do it all. When you tap into coal and you tap into oil, you tap into gas, you're getting a higher multiple. For all the energy that you have to spend on equipment and setting up an oil well, you're getting a much higher multiple of energy out of that oil well. And of course, the highest is nuclear. If you do a nuclear facility, you can get upwards of 100 times your energy back. From the uranium, but also from the construction of the complex facility. They can then run for 75 years, and you get a very large energy return on investment. Solar and wind and biomass don't have very high energy returns on investment. Basically, you put energy in, you do get a multiple back over the long term, but it's not as high as a multiple as hydrocarbons or nuclear. And so essentially that, if we trend towards lower energy return on investment types of sources, we're likely to have inflation. And it's somewhat disguised by the fact that, people will point towards, say, negative energy pricing for solar, right? That, basically that in some contexts, say solar or wind can be unusually cheap. And they're like, well, that's the future. The problem is not that they can produce very cheap energy for parts of the time. The problem is that they're usually paying out energy when you don't want it, right? And that's why it's free or negative, right? Because it's basically, if the sun's on, you can get a lot of extra energy, but then when you need energy in the evening, where are you going to get that energy from? Same thing with the wind. I mean, basically, if you have a super hot day, everybody turns on their air conditioning, the wind goes out. What happens to all your windmills? And so the problem is that storage is very expensive and uses a lot of battery metals, and it's not economical. So that changes the equation. And it's usually not fully included in the marketing or the kind of promotion of those types of energies. And I think a last point to think about is that the more you let nature store the energy and concentrate it, the more efficient it's going to be. So for example, let's say a hydro dam, for example, where does the energy for that come from? Well, it's a combination of, it's mostly solar, but it's concentrated solar. So basically the sun is sending all this energy on Earth. It's evaporating water over a very large distance. Then it's raining. But then because of geography, because of gravity, all that is collecting into rivers and flowing into bigger rivers. And it's concentrating all of that pent-up solar that evaporated that water in the first place. And then right at that concentrated point, at that big river, we put a dam. And then we capture what is essentially, indirect solar power. But we let nature just, do a lot of that concentration for us. We're gathering this energy over a very large area that's all been channeled through this river. Whereas when you're trying to, say, capture it with a solar panel or a windmill, you're not capturing concentrated, stored up energy. You're capturing the flow. You're capturing like a less dense flow. And so the problem is then, how do you store it? Well, you have to make your own storage. You have to go out and get battery metals, and you have to make your own storage. And so that's where you're essentially trying to replicate what nature does with these other sources, whether it's hydro, whether it's hydrocarbons, nuclear. These are all very dense stored types of energy. And there are some interesting renewable ones that are pretty dense and stable, like geothermal. There's one called ocean thermal energy conversion, OTEC. Basically, you can get like base load power from the difference in say hot ocean water surface and colder depths. It's kind of a 100-year technology. It's not just it's in my view, it's under-tapped. So there are renewable forms that are dense, but the general rule is that a lot of them aren't, especially wind and solar. Whereas hydrocarbons and nuclear are the ones that have been, these reliable sources that let nature do as much of the concentration and storage as possible. So it's a good question, and it's going to vary depending on what exactly you want to do. You need a higher energy return on investment if you're trying to grow rapidly, right? So if you're India and you're trying to go from 2,000 or 3,000 GDP per capita to 20 or 30,000 GDP per capita, basically expand your per capita energy usage by 5x. you need a very high energy return on investment. Um, on the other hand, if you're a wealthy country that already is very energy abundant, and you're trying to basically keep what you have and grow more slowly, basically you already have a lot of your material comforts done, and now you want software, you want travel, you want media, things like that. That's going to grow more slowly, and you can get away with lower energy return on investment as long as it's stable and as long as it's not too low, right? You still need some reasonable multiple, and so there's no exact number that's going to determine what everybody needs, because it really depends on how quickly you're trying to grow from a whatever base of growth you're at. Um, but basically, once you get down into the single digits, you're more likely to run into challenges, especially if you're still trying to grow at a reasonable pace. Not yet. I mean, basically, for thousands of years, we were using pretty low energy return on investment. You also had low population growth during that time. I mean, you had pretty stable global population. And then with the discovery of coal and then oil and gas, nuclear, you had this big, rise in all these energy sources. You had a big corresponding rise in population because one barrel of oil, even though, it's under $100 right now, that gives you thousands of man hours worth of energy. Basically it's, it's like imagine how many people you'd have to hire to like run a bicycle to like power all your lights, power your heat, power all the facilities that manufacture all the stuff, power all the trucks that bring that stuff to you. We basically all have the equivalent of like dozens of, like laborers working for us, but it's all the form of like, hydrocarbons and automation and things like that. And so that's really kind of the key challenge there overall. And the world's only gone up in terms of energy return on investment, and only really in the past, you could argue the past, like, say, couple decades, we've been kind of flatlining there, where we're trying to go more into like wind and solar. The developed countries have kind of shunned nuclear, and now I think we're running into some challenges. But even then, that's been offset by the fact that the developing countries are still going full speed ahead with coal, oil, in many cases hydrocarbons, nuclear, things like that. And so overall, the world's only gone higher in terms of energy return on investment. It's never tried to transition to a lower energy return on investment way of looking at it.